Just before the show begins, we track a press briefing by the Pentagon. It's been happening almost every day now. Two men take turns to answer questions. Two of the top names in the US defense establishment. And with every answer they give, they expose America's failure and helplessness. Yesterday they said the US will abide by the Taliban deadline for evacuation. Today they said they're helping the Taliban identify which people the US wants to evacuate. They look defeated. They give classic non-answers. And every time we say things cannot be worse than they are, it seems we're tempting fate because the images from Afghanistan keep getting worse. This is pure horror. The suffering of the people cannot be described in words. Once they leave, things are hardly better for them. The Pakistanis are making the most of this churn. Their trade with the Afghans has shot up. Their terror platforms have been revived and rebooted. On Gravitas tonight, as we bring you up to speed with what's happening in Kabul, we'll also bring you a special report on how the Taliban's rise spells America's fall as a superpower. Also on the show, how does Afghanistan's crisis impact India? Tonight we bring you a story from Kerala, where Taliban politics is playing out on another level. In Pakistan, they're talking about the return of the Lal Masjid. What is it and why is it significant? We'll discuss that. America tried to distract the world with a vice presidential visit to Southeast Asia, a tour to take on China, we were told. It's a flop. We'll tell you why. And our campaign to hashtag Save Afghan Women continues. Join us. 14 million Afghan women are in need of help. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
As the crisis in Afghanistan worsens, UNICEF has said around 10 million children in Afghanistan are in need of humanitarian assistance. Meanwhile, the World Food Programme has said 14 million people in the country could starve without urgent aid, and called on the international community to donate $200 million in food aid for Afghanistan. India's Chief of Defence Staff, General Bipin Rawat, has expressed concern over terror activities overflowing into Indian territory and assured that a contingency plan is already in place, as India was always prepared for a Taliban takeover in Afghanistan. Algeria has cut ties with Morocco, with both sides blaming each other for backing opposition movements in the past. More recently, Algeria blamed Morocco for the deadly forest fires in its north. Israel's Prime Minister Naftali Bennett has arrived in Washington for a two-day official visit. Bennett is expected to meet U.S. President Joe Biden on Thursday. Bennett's visit to Washington comes in the midst of heightened tensions between Israel and its regional archenemy, Iran. Government and opposition lawmakers come to blows in the Armenian parliament during the presentation of the government's five-year plan. The opposition has accused Prime Minister Pashinyan of planning further capitulation to Azerbaijan after the Karabakh conflict. The Delta variant outbreak has worsened in Australia's COVID epicenter, Sydney. New South Wales record 900 COVID cases in the last 24 hours. Japan has expanded its COVID-19 state of emergency, adding 8 more prefectures amid a surge in infections fueled by the Delta variant. Firefighters trapped in the ring of fire in the Mordovia region southeast of Moscow had to escape the wildfire trap, even as the blazes which ravaged Siberia moved to central regions. The Indian men's cricket team have been shot out for just 78 runs inside 41 overs on the first day of the third test against England. Leading 1-0 in the series, the visitors opted to bat first at Headingley, but were left reeling by 3 early strikes from James Anderson. Ollie Robinson then struck either side of the lunch break, and India's tail did not wag either, with 4 wickets falling in the space of 6 balls at one stage. Craig Overton also ended with 3 wickets, while Sam Curran grabbed 2. 23-time Grand Slam champion Serena Williams has pulled out of next week's US Open due to injury. The 39-year-old says she has still not recovered from the hamstring tear she suffered at Wimbledon, which had forced her to retire from her first round match in tears. Serena is the latest superstar to miss the year's final Grand Slam after Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal, who are both also injured.
"7 days. That is the deadline for the US and NATO forces. 7 days is all they have to exit the Kabul airport. They must evacuate themselves. They must airlift the thousands of Afghans who were promised a safe exit. It's a Herculean task. Evacuating everyone may not be possible. All sides know this. So the desperation is rising by the day. The chaos at the airport has become a full-blown crisis. The Taliban are blocking the roads leading up to the airport to prevent Afghans from leaving. The US and its allies are blocking the gates of the airport to prevent Afghans from entering. It's such a sorry state of affairs. Hundreds of people are trying to scale the airport walls to get inside. Many of them ended up falling in a ditch. It was filled with trash and filthy water. You can see these people standing knee-deep in the muck. One of them managed to clamber out. The troops pushed him back in. And this moment really captures what America and its allies have done to Afghanistan. The Afghans wanted democracy. And now they have been thrown back into the ditch of oppression. There is no one who is coming for help. They're camping on the streets, these people, waiting for the gates to open. Their condition is miserable. They can't even get a bottle of water without shelling out a fortune. At the airport, at the Kabul airport, one bottle of water is being sold for $40. One plate of rice costs $100. Listen to this.
At Kabul airport, one bottle of water is selling for $40 and a plate of rice for $100, and not Afghani currency but dollars. That is out of reach for common people.
And the Taliban are just making the situation worse. Our correspondent in Kabul, Anas Malik, today surveyed the roads leading up to the Kabul airport. Men from the Taliban have now installed their own checkpoints and they're stopping Afghans from leaving.
Behind me are the Taliban men who are here to guard and who are here to prevent those who are not with their documentation. To my right, to my left, everywhere you can see are the fighters or the men of the Taliban. Behind me, if my camera person can show you as well, there are scores of people who are lined up, who are waiting to go beyond this point. The Taliban commander over here says or claims that they're letting those go who have confirmed receipts, though that differs with what we have seen here on the ground. People are desperate to leave. People are anxious to leave.
These people have left everything behind to flee for their life. How will they do it? How will they get $40 for a bottle of water? The bitter truth is this: many of them are going to be left behind, even if they have valid visas and documents, because there are just too many people at the Kabul airport right now. A journalist who recently got out of Kabul narrated how his convoy was surrounded by Afghans when he got to the airport to leave the country. All of them had valid documents. Let me read out that account for you. This is what he says. As soon as they saw our convoy, they got up and ran towards the buses. They were showing us their passports or other documents. One man came to my window with wife and child and waved his passport saying, "I have a British visa but can't get in. Please let us on the bus." Is anyone listening to these appeals for help? The US isn't. It is bending to the Taliban's will. Yesterday, the Taliban said the American forces must leave by the 31st of August. They said it was the red line and there would be quote-unquote consequences if the US stayed beyond this date. How did the Americans respond? By accepting the deadline. In fact, President Joe Biden says he wants to get them out before the deadline if possible.
We are currently on a pace to finish by August the 31st. The sooner we can finish, the better. Each day of operations brings added risk to our troops. I'm determined to ensure that we complete our mission, this mission.
So Biden wants to get out by the 31st of August. What about his allies? Well, they are divided. Leaders from the G7 nations met yesterday to discuss the situation in Afghanistan. Some of them want to stay beyond the 31st. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, for one, wants the Taliban to allow evacuations beyond the deadline.
The number one condition we're setting as G7 is that they've got to guarantee right the way through August the 31st and beyond, safe passage, safe passage for those who want to come out.
The European leaders were trying to lobby America to push the deadline, but they were unable to convince Washington. German Chancellor Angela Merkel says the Kabul evacuation will end in a few days.
When this evacuation mission finishes and the conference does not result in new dates, then there will be, of course, a phase which we are preparing for intensively, where we need to find a way to make sure that even after this deadline, it is still possible to evacuate local staffers and people in need of protection. So in this context, there is also the question of whether a civilian airport in Afghanistan, in Kabul, could be possible. At the moment, we are in intense discussion about this.
Europe is under pressure. It fears that a new migrant crisis is coming. The exodus has already begun, in fact. By the end of July, more than 330,000 Afghans were displaced internally. At least 30,000 Afghans were leaving every week. And the numbers will only grow in the coming weeks. Greece is preparing for that. It has built a 40-kilometer-long wall on its border with Turkey to stop the Afghans from coming. But like history has shown us, border walls don't help. They may get politicians some votes, but they won't stop migration, and they will only add to the misery. The misery of the Afghans is only getting worse by the day. Leaving the homeland is no guarantee of a better life. They may survive, but at what cost? Ask Syed Ahmed Sadat. He served as Afghanistan's Minister of Communication until last year. Minister of Communication. In December 2020, he moved to Germany. This is what he's doing today. Syed Ahmed Sadat delivers pizza to support himself in Germany, a former minister of Afghanistan, because he doesn't have any money. This was the fate of a former minister. What will happen to the thousands of Afghans who are being airlifted right now? They're already being treated as second-class citizens. The Taliban are forcing them to leave, at the same time preventing them from leaving. The West is treating them like second-rate citizens. What options do these people have to reclaim their democracy? One Afghan had some answers. We spoke to Ahmad Wali Masood, the brother of legendary anti-Taliban warlord Ahmad Shah Massoud, whose son is leading the resistance movement in the Panjshir Valley right now. Ahmad Wali Masood has some advice for the international community. He says the Taliban cannot be trusted and world leaders should extend their support to the resistance front in the Panjshir Valley.
Right now, at this moment, what they need, they have to really kind of wait, not to recognize at the moment the Taliban government until there is a comprehensive government which are inclusive, which can be accepted by all the ethnicity in Afghanistan. That's very, very basic. They should refrain from kind of compromising the whole values of the very basic values of the human, and they should not kind of recognize. This is at the beginning, and they should pressurize the Taliban, and they should pressurize all those who are with Taliban to really curb the violence, not to attack houses of the people, not to break their houses, not to go and attack areas, not to kind of do selective killing of some people, some politicians, not to do that one. This is the first thing that we are asking the international community to help the Afghan people for their basic rights. That's important.
He was a minister in the Afghan government. But today, Syed Ahmed Sadat delivers pizza on a bicycle in Germany. Sadat has 2 degrees from Oxford. He has more than 20 years of experience in the field of communications. And he served the Ashraf Ghani government for 2 years. But even with his wealth of experience, Sadat can't make ends meet in his new homeland. He ran out of money and is now delivering pizza to support himself. Sadat is not an exception. Thousands of Afghans face this fate, and these are the lucky ones. Those who managed to survive and escape the Taliban's rule. A difficult future lies ahead of them. They are already being treated as second-class citizens. Afghans being airlifted to Qatar are living in abysmal facilities. According to a report, the evacuees have been kept in inhumane conditions at an American military base that is hosting Afghans temporarily. An American publication says it's like living in hell. There is trash, urine, feces, and vomit on the floors where Afghans are being kept. There is no air conditioning. And to make matters worse, local officials are now dealing with a rat infestation inside the hangar. America's botched up withdrawal is only making the lives of Afghan evacuees harder. US officials were caught unprepared. They were not ready to handle the large flow of evacuees. And now, terrorists could be trying to sneak in through the evacuation flights. Officials at the American base in Qatar have detected at least one Afghan with potential ties to ISIS. A total of 100 evacuees have been red flagged. They could be potential matches to American intelligence agency watch lists. Even the British are concerned. They believe potential terrorists are exploiting the chaos. They are trying to board flights out of the country. The vetting process is not yet complete, but politics could end up derailing the entire evacuation process. Donald Trump is attacking the Biden administration. He says the US president has surrendered to terrorists and is airlifting Afghans without vetting them. Some of the concerns are valid, but the politics will only hurt Afghans further. They're vulnerable. They have no option but to leave their country. But the world doesn't want them and is already treating them as second-class citizens, even terror suspects. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
A big question mark, meanwhile, hangs over the future of Afghanistan's economy. There's a severe shortage of cash. Prices of essentials are out of control. Imports stand suspended, so do exports, and much of bilateral trade. The Taliban's takeover has hit Afghanistan's business and business ties with most countries and neighbors. But there's one nation that is profiting from this crisis, and that is Pakistan. Pakistan's business in Afghanistan is booming. Bilateral trade between the two countries has risen by at least 50% in the last 1 week. This is according to Afghanistan's Chamber of Commerce and Industry, which, by the way, is now working with the Taliban. Meanwhile, the Pakistani media, citing traders from both sides, says the Taliban's takeover is, quote-unquote, a blessing for Pak-Afghan trade. How exactly? Well, before the Taliban took over, traders had to pay dual toll taxes, one to the Afghan government, another to the Taliban, which controlled most trade routes. Now that the Afghan government has collapsed, traders have to pay only to the Taliban. It's a win-win situation, they say. So what are they selling in Afghanistan? Pretty much everything. Grains, edible fruit, pharmaceutical products, wood, plastics, iron, steel. Why just Pakistan? What about other countries, other neighbors? Can't they provide these supplies? Yes, they can. But some are worried about the security situation. Others are averse to doing business with the Taliban. Also, Afghanistan is a landlocked country. Iran, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan are its best bets. But they've all partially sealed their borders after the Taliban's takeover. The borders with Pakistan, though, remain as porous as ever. These are the main border crossings that are used for trade. Chaman and Spin Boldak, Angur Adda, Ghulam Khan, Torkham and the Khyber Pass. Earlier, about 400 Pakistani trucks crossed these posts in a day. After the Taliban takeover, that number dropped to 40 Pakistani trucks crossing over to Afghanistan in a day. But in the last few days, the numbers have shot up again. Close to 400 trucks laden with supplies are entering Afghanistan every day. Traders say they're optimistic. They say that in the days to come, the trade volume between the two countries will cross the $1 billion mark. $1 billion. Why just traders? Pakistanis of all descriptions see profit in Afghanistan's misery. Pakistani politicians see the Taliban's rise as their chance to win Kashmir. Pakistani terror groups see it as their chance to set up a new base, and the Pakistani army sees it as its chance to control another country. So the money is flowing. What about propaganda? Well, it's slowly making its way. For weeks, we've been reporting how pro-Taliban sentiments are on the rise in Pakistan. We've been seeing rallies being held in Peshawar in support of the Taliban. We've seen Pakistani citizens raise pro-Taliban slogans at funerals. Well, now they're unfurling the Taliban flag at their mosques, the flag of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. Look at the image on your screen. It's from the Jamia Hafsa Seminary in Islamabad. The Taliban flags were raised on its rooftop a few days back. And just so you know, this seminary is linked to the Lal Masjid, or the Red Mosque, a place that is notorious for breeding Islamic fundamentalists. And I want to tell you a little bit about its history. It's very interesting. The Lal Masjid was established in 1965, shortly after Pakistan's capital moved from Karachi to the newly built Islamabad. This mosque derived its name from its red walls and interiors. But it was built only a stone's throw away from the headquarters of the ISI, the Inter-Services Intelligence, Pakistan's spy agency. With the help of the ISI, the mosque was granted state patronage. It began harboring Islamic extremists. It was used to recruit and mobilize volunteers to fight in Kashmir and Afghanistan. The first imam of the state-controlled mosque was this man, Maulana Muhammad Abdullah, infamous for his radical and sectarian views. Under General Zia-ul Haq's rule in the 1980s, this cleric rose to prominence and was made a member of Zia's Majlis-e-Shura, a political system which replaced the parliament then. It governed Pakistan on the principles of the Sharia. In the 1990s, this mosque became associated with the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. Maulana Muhammad Abdullah is said to have frequently visited Kandahar to pay homage to the leaders of the two outfits, Mullah Omar and Osama bin Laden. Then came the 21st century, and this mosque went rogue. Its relations with the Pakistani establishment turned hostile, primarily because Islamabad allied itself with the United States after 9/11. Fatwas were issued, directing Pakistani citizens to fight the Americans in Afghanistan, even Islamabad, if the need arose. The situation escalated in July 2007 when Lal Masjid became ground zero for a confrontation between Islamic extremists and the government of Pakistan. What was this confrontation about? Well, the mosque was advocating for the imposition of the Sharia law in Pakistan. It was calling upon Pakistani citizens to overthrow the government of Pervez Musharraf. At that time, the mosque was funded and operated by two brothers, Abdul Aziz and Abdul Rashid, both hardcore fundamentalists. For at least 18 months, these brothers and their supporters engaged in violent demonstrations, destruction of property, kidnapping, arson, armed clashes with Pakistani authorities. These events led to a military operation at the Lal Masjid where these fundamentalists were hiding. The operation lasted for 8 days. It led to at least 54 deaths. It was the deadliest internal battle in Pakistan, the repercussions of which were felt for a long time. There were at least 88 bombings in the year 2007 alone. 88. Multiple terror attacks across Pakistan in the years that followed. Most of these attacks were carried out by Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, both of which used the storming of the Lal Masjid as a rallying cry to fight the Pakistan government. This was 14 years back. 14 years on, this mosque, the Lal Masjid, has unfurled the flag of the Taliban once again. The Islamic seminaries it funds are making young girls sing songs hailing the Taliban's victory. Things are taking a dangerous turn. A terror platform has been revived and rebooted. The government of Pakistan, which is aiding, advising and legitimizing the Taliban, should be alarmed if it isn't already. Imran Khan should take some lessons from history, if not for the sake of his own image, then for the sake of the stability of his country. We can only hope. And one thing is clear from the Afghan debacle: America's stock is tanking. Their military is not unbeatable and their partnership is not reliable. Joe Biden keeps saying the US is back, America is back, but the fact is that America has turned its back to allies, to democracy, to human rights. America was the so-called good cop of global politics. Now it's the lazy old watchman, negotiating with terrorists, fleeing in the middle of the night, walking away from long-term commitments. Partners are rightly worried, can this sloppy superpower take on China? To answer this question, the US has deployed Vice President Kamala Harris. She's touring Southeast Asia with stops in Singapore and Vietnam. Vice President Harris has one mission: to rally American partners against China to convince them that Afghanistan was a one-off. In Singapore, she accused Beijing of intimidation and coercion in the South China Sea.
Our vision includes freedom of navigation, which is vital to us all. The livelihood of millions of people depend on the billions of dollars in trade that flow through these sea lanes each day. And yet, in the South China Sea, we know that Beijing continues to coerce, to intimidate, and to make claims to the vast majority of the South China Sea.
Strong words, but no one is listening. How can the US talk about free trade after handing 40 million Afghans to a medieval theocracy? Kamala Harris refused to talk about that. She said that there will be plenty of time to analyze those events. From Singapore, the vice president flew to Vietnam. It was a tricky journey. First, there was a security scare. Cases of the Havana Syndrome were reported in Hanoi. It's a mysterious condition that targets American diplomats and officials. No one knows what causes it or how to treat it. But the victims talk about dizziness, nausea, and memory lapses. This is the Havana Syndrome. As far as optics go, it was another blow. The vice president's flight was delayed by 3 hours. The only saving grace? She was flying to Hanoi and not to Ho Chi Minh City, or as the locals call it, Saigon. Vietnam was always going to be a tough stop. What's happening in Afghanistan is a rerun of America's defeat in Vietnam. The similarities are uncanny. Like these pictures, 2 US embassies and 2 helicopter evacuations 46 years and 4,000 kilometers apart. How does that look? Kamala Harris met the top Vietnamese leadership. She promised more visits by American warships and offered 1 million doses of the Wuhan virus vaccine, but Vietnam is not convinced. Its prime minister has promised China that Vietnam will not enter an anti-China alliance. And we are talking about a vocal critic of Beijing here. Vietnam is. Even those countries are not joining America's bandwagon, and it's clear why. The United States is unreliable. They've seen what is happening in Afghanistan. What if the South China Sea is next? It's all Beijing can talk about. How America destabilized Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. Listen to this.
美国迄今拒绝加入联合国海洋法公约。
The United States recklessly intervened in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria, but claimed to be protecting the interests of small countries. If the United States says that it is to maintain its hegemony and its self-interest, I think his words are much more credible. China firmly opposes the deployment of maritime law enforcement forces by the United States in the South China Sea to intervene in regional affairs and disrupt regional peace and stability.
中方坚决反对美方在
A low amount of PR can make up for lost credibility. American allies blindly took orders from Washington. Look where that got them. Stuck inside Kabul airport, surrounded by the Taliban, their evacuation missions are hitting a dead end. While American spy chiefs are having tea with Taliban leaders. Who will take the US seriously after all of this? Clearly, their priorities are confusing and their commitment is fragile. America is not a bankable leader anymore. It's a high-risk investment. If things get murky, they will abandon you. That's what we saw in Afghanistan. An outreach by Kamala Harris cannot erase the pictures from Kabul. If the US wants to lead the free world, it must show appetite, because right now, Biden's America is back sounds a lot like America first. And since we are at names, phrases and monikers, here's a question. What do we call the Taliban? Is this Taliban 2.0 or is it the same old Taliban? More importantly, are women safe under their rule? We have seen the Taliban answer questions of women journalists. You've seen them address the issue of women's safety, even tweet images of girls going back to school. There's definitely some messaging going on here, but should we take it at face value? Should we assume that Afghan women will be safe? Or will any such assumption be a huge mistake? The world has been trying to answer these questions. Everyone is trying to make their best guess. But those who have seen the Taliban up close, dealt with them, lived under their tyranny, know better, and they say that the Taliban have not changed, not one bit, at least when it comes to women's rights. The woman on your screen is too scared to give her real name. She's scared that the Taliban will come after her. We're calling her Amina. She's Afghan, but currently thousands of miles away from home. Amina is in Rome, and in order to get to this foreign country, she had to climb a pole outside the Kabul airport, wave a red handkerchief, then struggle to find a seat in an airplane out of Kabul. Why was she so desperate to get out? Why did she not choose to stay back when the Taliban were promising a better deal for women? Let's ask Amina.
Again, we are going back to the 19th century, and maybe we face with a dark future. The women in Afghanistan, maybe still they remain uneducated, they remain far from the society.
Amina says things have already drastically changed for women in the last 1 week. There are no women inside Kabul, she says.
It's obvious that by coming Taliban in the power, the situation of women already really changed. From Sunday, which approximately it has been gone 1 week that Taliban comes to power to Afghanistan. So during this week, this scene of this city for women has been changed. There is no woman inside the city.
There are no women, and that's because they have either gone into hiding or fled. Ariana Saeed is among the latter, those who fled. She's an Afghan pop star. She's famous. On a regular day, you will see Ariana dressed in a Western outfit and heavy makeup. But when the Taliban entered Kabul, she covered up head to toe, wore a burqa, rushed to the airport. She went with her fiance's young cousin, just in case the Taliban stopped her. She would pretend to be on a family outing, but if the Taliban identified her, Ariana knew she would be dead. Here's what happened on the way to the airport.
So we're driving and we passed through about 5 Taliban checkpoints. One of them actually stopped our car, and it was like 11 at night, and one of them, he just put a light through the car, and the minute that he saw me with the little boy, and obviously I was covered with a hijab, you could only see my eyes, and I was wearing glasses as well. It was just terrifying, you know. I was thinking, I was just shaking at that moment, thinking, what if he's going to ask for identities and stuff like that? What am I going to do? I have, you know, very clearly spoken, you know, against Taliban for so many years now. I have posted against them and things like that. And I was literally scared, like, what if they come inside the terminal, and if they catch me here, you know, that would be the end of me and my fiancé.
Ariana is safe now, but more than 14 million Afghan women are not. They're trapped in Afghanistan. Their futures are at the disposal of the Taliban. Ariana is blaming the West for it. I can't believe you left Afghanistan in chaos, she writes in an Instagram post. And she's addressing it to US President Joe Biden. The pop star is using her fame to amplify the call for help for Afghan women. She said that she and other Afghan women are cynical of the Taliban's promises. They do not believe in a Taliban 2.0, and we cannot question their cynicism and distrust. Let's look at some recent history. December 2020, a TV anchor was killed in Jalalabad. In January, 2 judges were shot. In March, 3 young employees of a TV network were shot. The same month, Afghanistan's Journalist Safety Committee reported an 18% decline in the number of women working in the media sector. All of this is very recent. The Taliban could not possibly have changed overnight, become 2.0 or whatever the world wants to call them. They could not have miraculously changed their view on women. Women are still being burnt alive in Afghanistan. They're being shot at. This Afghan-born filmmaker, American filmmaker now, will tell you what's happening in her home country as we speak.
I get a lot of phone calls from Afghans, desperate desperate, help me, I am stuck, I can't leave, people are outside my door, they are knocking at my door, they're going door to people's homes. It's really, really a horrific nightmare.
You see, nightmares end with daybreak, but regressive regimes last longer. Taliban 2.0 or the same old Taliban, whatever it is, we cannot let the women of Afghanistan suffer at the hands of the terror group once again. In the last 20 years, Afghan women have made progress. They've received an education. They've re-entered the workforce. They've learned to dream again. It is now the world's responsibility to save those dreams. It's our responsibility to hashtag Save Afghan Women. Join this Gravitas campaign. Put pressure on your governments to send help. Write to international organizations. Ask them to evacuate Afghan women. Tweet to rights groups. Ask them to do more. Use the hashtag Save Afghan Women. You can all do our bit. And talking about repressive regimes, well, the Chinese regime is taking over schools. It is rewriting textbooks to match the vision of Xi Jinping. It plans to incorporate what they're calling Xi Jinping's thought, a political doctrine, into the curriculum of schools and universities. Why would they do this? To inculcate loyalty for the president in the next generation of Chinese citizens. How do they plan to do this? And what do they plan to teach? Our next report has some answers.
If you're from China and have graduated, be glad and thankful. Because the Chinese regime is taking over schools. After cracking down on private tuitions, banning foreign textbooks and taking control of some private schools, Beijing now wants to rewrite textbooks. It wants to put the Xi Jinping thought into the national curriculum. Some kids who return to class next month will be made to memorize a political doctrine. One that lays out Xi Jinping's vision to strengthen the Communist Party's control. This doctrine will be taught from primary schools all the way to the universities. What is it called? Xi Jinping's thoughts. And what exactly are his thoughts? Expansionism, persecution and genocide? For the world, yes. But for Chinese students, these thoughts will come in the shape of communist principles and ideals as their leader views them. And this subject won't be optional. According to the decree, the teachings in primary schools will focus on planting the seeds of loving the party, the country and socialism in the young hearts. To let them know that General Secretary Xi Jinping is the leader of the whole party and the people of the country. In middle school, a combination of perceptual experience and knowledge study to help students form basic political judgments and opinions. And in college, there will be more emphasis on the establishment of theoretical thinking. They will teach the importance of one country, two systems, the importance of reunification with the motherland, and the absolute authority of the party over the people. The new decree also stipulates a ban on foreign textbooks, a ban on foreign tutors, a ban on tie-ups with overseas universities, and even a possible ban on the English language. Earlier this month, Shanghai banned English exams, saying proficiency in the language was no longer necessary. Now, as China further mixes ideology with education, calls for an all-out English ban are only growing. All these moves are aimed at controlling the minds of Chinese citizens, no doubt. But they're also aimed at making them worship Xi Jinping, who plans to continue ruling well beyond the end of his term next year. So he's inculcating personal loyalty in the next generation of Chinese citizens. Xi's predecessors have also shaped political ideologies, which have been incorporated in the Communist Party's constitution or thinking. But no one besides Mao Zedong has had their ideology described as thought and pushed into school textbooks. Xi Jinping wants to rise to the stature of Mao. We'll reserve our thoughts on whether it's a goal he should be chasing. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
And we'll wrap the show tonight with a question about the so-called Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. Well, who is the leader of this emirate? Who is the emir? Is it Hibatullah Akhundzada, the supreme leader of the Taliban? If yes, then where is he? Nobody knows. There's absolute mystery about this man's whereabouts. In fact, only a few people claim to have seen him. And there's only one publicly available image of Akhundzada. And it's not unusual, we understand, for a Taliban leader to have a low profile, a low public profile. And we get that. But in Akhundzada's case, there's strong speculation that he's either dead or in Pakistan's custody. And if he isn't, then why has he not appeared in public? It's been 10 days since the Taliban took over Kabul, and we haven't heard a word about Akhundzada's status or his whereabouts. So where is he? Is he dead or alive? Is he hiding or is he in custody? It's a question the Taliban must answer the next time they choose to hold their now famous press conference. We'll wrap with that, leaving you with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.